We start by seeing the beautiful landscapes of the Northern Territory of Australia, where there is a diversity of fauna and flora. We meet the tourist Pete McKell, who gets off a bus without luggage but well-dressed. He heads to a quiet nearby village. The heat is intense and he takes off his suit. People watch the stranger arriving with a suspicious look, but they do not disturb him. Pete enters a bar and talks with the owner named Merv. He says that the airport staff lost his luggage, so he is only wearing those clothes. Pete asks about a boat tour he would participate in, but the man cuts the subject and asks if he wants to drink something. Pete receives a call from Phil, and while he talks, he observes several newspaper photos hanging on the wall, showing people who were brutally killed, and the culprits are large crocodiles. After the work call, Pete hangs up, and after having a drink, he goes to the starting point of the excursion, where there are already several people boarding. A woman named Kate Ryan takes the tickets, and while some passengers worry about the height of the boat, Kate's friend dog, Kevin, watches everyone. As soon as Pete enters, a man named Russell boards right after with 2 tickets, but says that only he is going. After everyone has boarded, Kate says they will return before 6 in the evening. Then, the excursion begins. The couple Everett and Mary discuss how he is already filming, arguing that he should save space to film the crocodiles and show it to their daughter later. As the vessel sailed, Kate talks about the rivers that cross the entire Northern Territory and the immense number of crocodiles that inhabit that region. Among the passengers is Gwen, a smoker, who at the moment annoys the couple with the smoke from her cigarette. We also meet Alan's family, his wife Elizabeth, who has cancer, and their teenage daughter Sherry. There is also a photographer named Simon, who offers to take a family photo. The excursion passes by another group, and they see an instructor feeding the crocodiles, which causes admiration from everyone. Further ahead, Pete's group passes another large crocodile, and Kate tells them about the species, warning that as long as they don't get in the water, everyone will be safe. She explains that in the water, these crocodiles can reach 30 kilometers per hour, faster than a human for sure. They also tend to observe their prey and can jump several meters out of the water to reach them. Curious, Sherry asks how big the species of the reptile grows, and Kate says it can grow up to 8 meters and weigh 2 tons. Despite everyone's concerns, Kate jokes and makes the trip more relaxing, saying that crocodiles only attack tourists. However, she also mentions that such animals do not attack anything larger than themselves, so the vessel is safe. A few minutes later, Simon takes pictures of the area, and Gwen feeds Kevin. Meanwhile, Pete goes to Kate to talk to her. We discover that he works for a magazine in Chicago and writes articles about tourism. A few kilometers away from the village, the group encounters 2 men in a boat who arrive abruptly and stop in front of the vessel. One of them is named Neil, and his companion is Colin, both acquaintances of Kate. Unfortunately, Neil is a bit annoying and makes advances toward Kate, but she quickly asks him to leave. When he insults Pete and insists on staying, Everett asks the guys to let them continue the excursion. He does not want to leave, so Kate turns on the boat, threatening to hit their smaller boat. Then Colin, fearing this, accelerates, causing Neil to fall into the water. His friend quickly rescues him while the group continues the tour. Minutes later, we learn that Russell lost his partner and came on the trip to scatter her ashes in the river. The sad scene is only witnessed by Sherry, who decides not to speak to anyone else. Finally, Kate arrives with everyone at the end of the excursion and decides to return to the village. Suddenly, while filming the scenery around him, Everett observes something like a flare not far from there. He tells Kate what he saw, and the others soon see another flare being launched. Fearing that it might be someone needing help, Kate alerts the base and says she will check the launched signal. Some do not want to go to the location, as they need to catch the bus back to the city, but Kate questions them, saying it could be someone needing help, and if they were in their place, they would want to be helped. Even with the group divided, Kate goes upstream to check the location. As they go up the river, Simon photographs the paintings on the high walls that surround the river and observes the large painting of an enormous crocodile, something that makes him fearful. A few minutes later, they arrive at the location and see a capsized vessel, but there is no sign of human life. Suddenly, something large passes beneath them in the water and shakes the boat violently. The brief attack ends up puncturing the vessel, forcing Kate to head for dry land on a small island. Unfortunately, the boat fills with water and the engine is damaged. The group worries, as they are now trapped there, with a non-functioning radio to call for help. What makes everyone even more fearful about the current situation is that in a few hours, the river level will rise, as that river is the type that rises in level at certain times, and they will be submerged if they remain there. Some consider crossing to get to solid ground and think of a way to cross the river to the other side. Kate warns that this is madness, but Russell says it's the only way for everyone to stay safe longer. When no one follows him, he decides to go alone, but Everett stops him from crossing. At that moment, the radio picks up a signal, and everyone turns to Simon. However, Everett remains on the riverbank, and suddenly he disappears without anyone seeing what happened. The group only observes a huge part of the tail of what appears to be a crocodile. His wife becomes desperate, while the others cannot believe what they have just witnessed. At this moment, the group finds themselves far away from any sign of life, and no screams will be heard. When Pete asks Kate how much time they have until the tide rises, she says that the biggest problem is the beast that inhabits the river. She looks for the flares, but they are far from the ship and in the river, and no one will go looking for them since the risk of being eaten is great. Fortunately, there is good news for them. Neil and his companion approach the location, making everyone happy with their arrival. However, the man passes by them and away from the island, insulting Kate for what she did earlier. However, they do not hear well when Kate and the others shout for them to get out of the water. Suddenly, their boat is suddenly attacked and capsized. They fall into the water, and their boat sinks. Desperately, Neil swims to the island, but his friend was not so lucky. Time passes, and night finally comes, as the tide begins to rise slowly. While Kate builds a campfire, Simon, even very afraid, retrieves some cans of beer that are near two dead ducks. Knowing they cannot wait much longer, Neil says he will swim slowly across to the other side and tie a rope to the trees so that everyone can cross safely afterward. Alan says his wife will not be able to cross, but Neil says she needs to, as the crocodile has already marked them as food and will return since they are in its territory. Talking with Pete, Neil says he believes the animal has gone crazy because with so many people passing through there, the animal thinks they want to steal its territory, which is why it attacks them, and those it does not kill, it takes to its lair. The moment to cross arrives, and Neil bravely begins the crossing. Fortunately, he makes it to the other side and quickly ties the rope to a tree. Meanwhile, Simon films and observes the surroundings with the night vision camera. Mary is the first to start crossing the rope, but halfway across she freezes with fear, and this is not good for the group's crossing. In a hurry, Alan wants to put his daughter to cross, even though Kate warns not to do so. The aggressive man forces his daughter and his own to climb, and now there are 3 people on the rope, which Neil believes will not hold so much weight. He shouts at the woman to hurry, but knocks over the lantern, and when he goes to pick it up, he hears a grunting sound right next to him. Suddenly, he is attacked, and what the others see is just something large entering the river. The 3 hanging on the rope, scared, almost fall, but the problem is that their weight causes the tree to bend until it finally collapses, knocking everyone into the river. Desperate, they swim back, and fortunately, everyone is fine. However, they do not see any sign of Neil anymore. Recovering from the scare, Alan laments what happened, but still on the riverbank, he is suddenly attacked by the enormous crocodile, which throws him into the water and then goes to devour him. His family and friends are in shock at what they have just witnessed. The tide continues to rise, and Kate is still crying over her friend's loss. Pete approaches her and comforts her. She says they need the first aid kit, which is in the submerged part at the back of the boat, so they go to retrieve it. Pete slowly enters the water and soon reaches the boat. He searches using a flashlight, but only finds an anchor and ropes. He then decides to make a plan. Thinking the crocodile is just another unintelligent animal, he wants to make a trap and lure the reptile so that they can swim afterward. Simon questions the idea, but with no time to discuss another plan, they prefer Pete's plan. The problem now is finding a bait to lure the crocodile. And unfortunately, what they see is Kevin, Kate's dog. Most do not want to do this harm, so Simon remembers something and goes to the other side to bring back 2 dead ducks that were on Neil's boat. They begin to fish for the creature, and Pete stays to move the rope since the baits are dead, while the others wait for the signal that it has worked. After a few minutes, Kate goes to Pete and leaves the dog with him, saying that crocodiles can smell dogs well, so he should cross last. As she is about to leave, the fishing works and the crocodile grabs the bait. Kate rushes to assist the others with the crossing, while Pete tries to hold the rock that secures the rope tied to the anchor. When everyone crosses, Kate begins her crossing, but at that moment the crocodile drops the bait and worries Pete. Seeing that Kate is still in the water, he shouts a warning that the animal has escaped the trap. She tells the others to stay away from the area, but then the animal grabs her and drags her underwater. Pete tries to swim to her but doesn't make it in time. With no choice, he crosses alongside the dog. He still shouts for Kate, but not seeing the woman anymore, he decides to follow the others. After entering the forest, he calls out to the others, but they do not respond. Suddenly, the dog senses something, breaks free from the leash, and runs in another direction. Pete lets the animal run and sits down to rest, but soon after, the dog starts barking non-stop. Curious, Pete goes to the location where the barks came from and discovers that the sounds are coming from inside a tree trunk, which is the entrance to an underground cave. Carelessly, Pete ends up falling further inside, and there he discovers what remains of a man who is entering the crocodile's lair. Even scared and horrified by the scene, he decides to go deeper into the lair. Hearing the dogs barking, Pete follows the sound and soon finds the animal standing in the darkness of the place. When he approaches the dog, he discovers that the dog has guarded his owner's body as he felt her scent and ran to where she was. Worried, Pete checks if Kate is still alive, and to his joy, even with many wounds, Kate is still showing signs of life. Suddenly, the dog hears something and runs outside, but he is attacked by the crocodile, and only his whimpers are heard. Pete takes Kate's body to get her out of there, but realizes that there is no other exit. So he hides the woman and hangs onto the tree roots. When the large reptile enters its lair, Pete watches in disbelief at the size of the crocodile. After eating its prey, the monstrous reptile settles down to rest and positions itself looking at the entrance of the lair. Pete carefully observes the crocodile's position and realizes that his exit will be difficult. He takes Kate's body and starts his stealthy exit, always watching to see if the beast will wake up. As soon as he sees the exit clear, he lifts Kate into his arms, but when he looks back at the crocodile's position, he no longer sees it there. The crocodile has entered the small lake and tries to attack them by surprise, but fortunately misses the strike. Taking advantage of the thick roots around him, Pete places himself among them, but the reptile fiercely tries to pierce the protection. Trying to protect Kate, Pete leaves the location and lures the crocodile to the other part. Pete uses a piece of wood to protect himself, but the ferocity of the reptile breaks it and still throws Pete away. Seeing the reptile heading toward him, Pete enters the crevices of the rocks and narrowly escapes being bitten. The crocodile does not give up and tries to reach the terrified Pete, who, while trying to defend himself from the gigantic mouth of the reptile, loses some of his fingers. Pete screams in pain, but his problems are still not over. He ends up seeing a sharp-pointed bone on the ground, and without thinking twice, he grabs it and wounds the crocodile in the eye. Feeling pain as well, the reptile decides to back away from the man, but blocks the exit with its large body. Kate wakes up, and the noise attracts the fierce reptile, which worries Pete. Fearing for his friend's life, he stands up and calls out to the crocodile, which does not hear him, because its next target is now an easier prey. Pete sees near him the broken spike with a sharp end and thinks of a plan. He lures the beast and positions himself sitting next to a rock, waiting for the reptile's attack. The crocodile, not being very cautious or smart, does not realize that its next attack will be fatal for itself. Pete bravely remains in place with the stake extended forward, and when the crocodile attacks him, the stake pierces the head of the reptile. The large crocodile roars in pain, but its end has already been decreed. Fortunately, Pete survives the attack and quickly escapes from the enormous mouth of the reptile. After checking that the crocodile is dead, Pete goes to Kate, and both exit the lair of death. The day has dawned, and now all that is left is to wait for rescue to arrive. He heads toward the island where they ran aground, where many park police and rescue operations are already taking care of the other survivors. After receiving care, Pete goes to Kate, and before she is taken away by helicopter, she thanks him for saving her from the terrible crocodile.